I first heard about the apartment from my wife, Mandy. It was a family property technically under her parents' name, but managed entirely by her. She leased it out to a woman named Beth, around Mandy's age, probably mid-30s, who had no husband or kids. Beth had been living there for about 6 months, and though I'd heard her name mentioned, I hadn't actually met her until one particular day when I got home earlier than expected, hoping to surprise Mandy with dinner plans. As I walked in, I heard voices coming from the living room. Mandy was talking to someone, though I could not yet tell who it was. I stepped into the room and found Mandy sitting on the couch next to a woman I did not recognize. "Hey, you're home early," Mandy said, her voice carrying a hint of surprise. "Yeah, I thought we could have dinner together," I replied, glancing at the unfamiliar woman. "This is Beth," Mandy introduced with a smile, "the one renting the apartment." Beth stood up and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you." She greeted me with a friendly smile. "Nice to meet you, too," I replied, shaking her hand. I noticed Mandy's blouse was rumpled, which seemed odd. "Why is your blouse so wrinkled?" I asked casually. Mandy glanced down, smoothing the fabric hurriedly. "Oh, I must have forgotten to iron it this morning," she replied, a little too quickly. We chatted a bit longer, and then Beth left. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing that Mandy was spending more time at the apartment, always with some reason about fixing or maintaining things. I did not think much of it at first. Then, one evening, while Mandy was in the shower, her phone buzzed with a text from Beth. The tone of the message struck me as odd, a bit more personal than I would have expected. That was the moment I started paying closer attention. The next day, Mandy said she was heading over to the apartment again. After she left, I decided to follow her, just to see what was going on. I began dropping by the apartment unexpectedly, each time with some excuse. Every time, I would find Mandy and Beth sitting together, either on the couch or at the table, always fully dressed but clearly flustered, as if I had walked in on something private. Once, I brought over some tools, saying I wanted to help with the supposed repairs. They were sitting on the couch, looking a bit too flushed for a casual visit. "Oh, we were just chatting," Mandy said quickly, standing up and brushing down her skirt. "You did not need to come, Tom," she added with a nervous smile. Another time, I showed up with groceries, saying I thought they might need some supplies. This time, they were at the kitchen table, sitting closer than usual. "Thanks, but we were just about to head out," Mandy said, her smile tight and a bit forced. Each time, something about their behavior seemed just slightly off. The way they looked at each other, the way they would catch their breath when I arrived. I began to suspect there was more going on. Eventually, I decided on a new approach. The layout of the apartment building allowed for a bit of eavesdropping. One evening, after Mandy had left, mentioning something about needing to check the wiring, I followed her again. About 10 minutes later, I was at the building, pressing my ear against the wall in the corridor just outside the apartment. At first, I heard only small talk, some comments about the apartment and idle chat about their day. Then, gradually, the conversation grew more personal. They started talking about family, their relationships, and then it took a more intimate turn. I heard Mandy's voice grow softer. "Beth, your eyes are just so beautiful. I have never seen a shade that deep," she said. Beth giggled, and I could almost hear the smile in her voice. "And your lips, Mandy, they are so full and perfect. I could kiss them all day." The tension between them grew, and my heartbeat picked up as I listened. Mandy's voice lowered even more. "Your waist, Beth, it is so elegant. And those legs, just amazing." Beth responded in a soft voice. "And your figure, Mandy, your shape is just right. I have always admired it." The compliments and whispered words continued, growing increasingly affectionate, until I caught myself comparing it to my own relationship with Mandy. I realized that Mandy had always wanted more attention and affection from me, more foreplay even, while our own moments rarely went beyond 5 minutes. Suddenly, their voices quieted down, replaced by soft sounds and sighs that hinted they were moving beyond just words. I took a deep breath and reached into my pocket, gripping the key to the apartment. I listened a few more minutes, letting things play out until I was certain they were fully engaged with each other. Finally, I quietly opened the door, stepping inside. As I entered the living room, I saw the startled looks on their faces. Beth was fumbling with her shirt, and Mandy was struggling to pull up her pants, both looking utterly shocked. I could not resist a smirk. I did not just interrupt a little shoot for that famous orange website, did I? Mandy's face went pale, and she tried to speak but quickly closed her mouth, seeming to realize that any excuse would sound hollow. She sat back on the couch, looking defeated. I took a seat across from them and kept my tone calm. So, anything you want to tell me? Mandy's voice came out shaky, but she managed to say, "How dare you talk to me like that?" I raised my eyebrows, feigning surprise. "Oh, so you are capable of more than I thought," I replied. For a moment, Mandy looked furious, but then she simply looked away, her eyes filling with tears. "Look, Mandy," I said, my tone measured. "I have been piecing things together for a while, so this is not exactly a shock. Let us take a breather and talk about this later." With that, I got up and left, leaving them half-dressed and stunned. The cold air hit me as I walked onto the street, and I started walking down the road, trying to clear my head. The truth is, if it had been some muscle-bound guy instead of Beth, I probably would have reacted very differently. I might have done something right then and there. But Mandy had never mentioned she was interested in women, and I had never even thought she could be. In my mind, people who were into the same sex often looked a certain way. Dyed hair, heavy makeup, maybe something bold in their appearance. But Mandy and Beth looked like any regular women. Mandy, with her light brown hair and soft waves around her shoulders, fair skin, and expressive green eyes, always dressed in jeans and sweaters, modest and unassuming. Beth had a similar style, with her straight dark bob, hazel eyes, and easy smile. As I walked, I felt this strange, unfamiliar sensation. I did not know what I was supposed to think or do. I remembered once seeing a television show where a psychologist was discussing whether intimacy with someone of the same sex counts as cheating. I had not thought much of it at the time, but now the words replayed in my mind, and I could see it for what it was: betrayal. I had to handle this like it was some muscled-up, bearded bodybuilder instead of Beth. As I walked along, I happened to pass by a peculiar guy, likely homeless, who was behaving a bit strangely, laughing and approaching strangers, who naturally dodged him. He came right up to me and asked, "You look deep in thought. What's going on?" Normally, I would have just brushed him off, but in my state, I answered, "My wife cheated on me." I paused, then added, "With a woman?" The man's eyes widened, and he shouted, "That is not a real woman. That's a... well, you know what I mean. Just move on, man. Be free." Then he skipped off down the street, disappearing into the crowd. Odd as his words were, they struck a nerve. Maybe he had a point. I kept walking until I came across a small spot that sold that classic Canadian dish, poutine, French fries loaded with cheese and drenched in gravy, just the comfort food I needed. I ordered a portion, sat down on a nearby bench, and ate in silence. Once I finished, I tossed the empty container in the trash. Just as I started to walk again, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I did not recognize. I hesitated, then picked it up. "Hello?" "Hey, Bill, it's Beth," came the voice on the other end. I frowned. "Beth? How did you get my number?" "Mandy gave it to me," she replied. "She's really upset and is not ready to talk to you right now. Can we meet in person? This is not something I can explain over the phone." I was not sure if I wanted this conversation, but I agreed. "All right. Where do you want to meet?" "There's a park close to where you are. Let's meet there in 10 minutes, she suggested. "Fine," I said and hung up. As I walked to the park, I wondered what Beth could possibly want to say. A few minutes later, I spotted Beth approaching, looking tense but determined. When she was close enough, I could not resist taking a jab. "So, did you two manage to get a good take for your little movie shoot? If I accidentally photobombed, I at least deserve a blur." Beth's face turned red, clearly taken aback. "I'm sorry, Bill," she said softly. I kept the sarcasm going, throwing every insult I could muster. "I guess you two are just training for a career in adult films, huh? Mandy's always wanted to be a star, right? Or maybe next time you'll invite me for a cameo. Or would that mess up the all-girls theme?" Beth winced but stayed put. "Bill, I know you are angry, and you have every right to be. But please, Can we talk seriously? She said. I crossed my arms, fixing her with a glare. So, is this where you apologize and make excuses? Fine, go ahead. Beth took a deep breath. Mandy is really torn up about this. She did not mean for things to get so complicated, and she never wanted to hurt you. She has been confused about her feelings for a long time. So my face did not end up in any frames then? I added, throwing in another jab. Beth looked down, hurt, but continued. No, Bill, your face is not in any frame. Mandy she is scared and did not know how to tell you. She has been struggling with her bisexuality for a while, and meeting me just brought all of those feelings to the surface. I stared at her, feeling the weight of her words sink in. What is the point of struggling if she was born that way? And you? What role did you play in all this? Beth nodded, swallowing hard. I care about Mandy. None of this was planned. Neither of us meant to betray you, but things got out of hand. Mandy loves you, Bill. She is just confused and needs time to work through her emotions. I looked at her steadily. So what do you want from me? Beth sighed. I am just asking that you talk to Mandy when she is ready. Give her a chance to explain. She is scared and does not want to lose you. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. This is a lot to take in. Beth placed a hand on my arm. Just be patient. Give her some time. That is all I am asking. Looking into her eyes, I saw sincerity there, and despite everything, it seemed genuine. All right, Beth. I will give her some time. Beth looked relieved. Thank you, Bill. That is all I ask. I turned and walked away, a whirlwind of emotions running through my mind. As I left the park, I kept circling back to Mandy and her feelings. It was ironic. She was the one who had been unfaithful, yet now I had to wait for her to be ready to talk. The unfairness of it all almost made me laugh. While Mandy was hit with everything at once, I had weeks to come to terms with what was happening between her and Beth. Beth had said that Mandy would reach out when she was ready to talk. At first, I agreed, but now I was thinking, why should I have to wait? She cheated on me, and I am supposed to wait for her to be ready? I decided I was going to go to the apartment and talk to Mandy right away. But as I was heading there, my phone rang. It was my coworker, Chuck. I had completely forgotten that today was our boss's birthday, and we were supposed to have a corporate party. Hey, Bill. Chuck said cheerfully. Just checking in. We are ordering food and making sure there is enough for everyone. The party starts in about 40 minutes. For a second, I considered unloading everything on Chuck, but thought better of it. Hey, Chuck, yeah, everything's good. I will be there soon. I hung up, putting my plan to talk to Mandy on hold. I drove home, quickly freshened up, and changed into something suitable for the party. When I arrived, the delivery guys were just setting up stacks of pizza boxes and trays of sushi. While dealing with my problems with Mandy, I had forgotten to pick up a gift for the boss, so I stopped at a perfume shop on the way and got a bottle of cologne. I had seen the same brand on his desk once, so I hoped he would like it. I handed over the gift, and the boss gave me a friendly pat on the back. Thanks, Bill. You did not have to, he said with a smile. Just a little token of appreciation, I replied, forcing a smile. I figured the best way to take my mind off things was to dive into the party. I grabbed a slice of pizza and a drink, then joined a group of my younger female colleagues who were laughing and chatting. Hey, everyone! I greeted them with a grin. How is the party going? Jessica, one of them, smiled and said, It's great. How about you? You seem a bit off. I shrugged, trying to seem casual. Just have a lot on my mind. For the next hour, I kept myself busy, flirting and chatting, trying to keep my mind off Mandy and Beth. As the drinks flowed, the atmosphere became even more relaxed. Our boss had often shared how he started the company from scratch, connecting freelancers with clients until he eventually hired more people, set up an office, and built it into the business it was today. It was inspiring to see how far it had come. I tried to enjoy the party, letting myself unwind a bit, especially around Jessica. An hour in, Jessica noticed my unusually relaxed demeanor. You seem different tonight, Bill, she teased with a smile. You do not usually act this way. I just chuckled and said, maybe it is time I show everyone the real me. As the night wore on, I found myself with my arm around Jessica's waist, enjoying her company. Just then, Chuck came over, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, buddy, your lady's here." I blinked, confused. "You mean Mandy?" "Yeah," he replied, chuckling. "She looks a bit upset, but I see you are in a good mood. Go cheer her up. She's standing by the entrance, looking pretty down." Even though I was tipsy, the mention of Mandy snapped me back to reality. I headed toward the exit and found Mandy sitting on a bench outside, looking pretty torn up. I walked over to her and said, "Hey, stand up. You look really down." She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Bill, I am so sorry. I love you so much. I never meant for any of this to happen." The more she talked about how terrible she felt and how much she loved me, the more the alcohol took over, making it hard to take her words seriously. She was clearly feeling remorseful, but my mind was too foggy to fully grasp it. Just then, Jessica popped out of the door and called out, "Bill, where did you go? We are not done yet." I gave Mandy a friendly pat on the shoulder and said, "Let's talk tomorrow. Go home and get some rest. I will be back later." With that, I turned and went back inside with Jessica. The party was still going strong, and as the night wore on, I found myself letting loose, no longer feeling embarrassed or out of place. I held Jessica like she was my girlfriend, and she did not seem to mind one bit. She was about a decade younger than Mandy and seemed to enjoy the attention I was giving her. At one point, my buddy Chuck nudged me, smirking. "What are you doing, Bill? How would your Mandy feel about this?" I just laughed it off, but I found myself noticing every detail about Jessica, how attractive she was, and how I had never really paid attention to her before. Jessica seemed to be feeling the same way. The rest of the night blurred into a mix of laughter, music, and drinks. I had all but forgotten about Mandy as I continued having fun, especially with Jessica. We drank until my memory started slipping. My last clear memory was Jessica grabbing my hand and suggesting we go somewhere more private. She led me toward the bathroom, and I remember the hazy sensation of my fly coming undone and my hands stretched out to keep my balance. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was waking up on the office sofa. The place had been tidied up. Empty pizza boxes and sushi trays were gone, but my clothes and hair were a mess. I struggled to recall anything after 2 a.m., especially that moment with Jessica in the bathroom. Chuck came over and asked, "How are you feeling?" Fine, I guess," I replied, still trying to piece together the night. "You were having a blast, first chatting with everyone, then focusing more and more on Jessica. Seriously, you two looked like a real couple. Then she took you by the hand, and you both disappeared into the back," he said, looking amused. "Me and a couple of the guys found you both in the bathroom and helped you back to the couches." A mix of embarrassment and curiosity washed over me. "Wait, so, did you see what happened in the bathroom?" Chuck nodded, looking slightly awkward. "Yeah, we saw. You two were pretty out of it. Nothing too wild happened, but we figured you needed a little help getting out of there." "Where's Jessica?" I asked, more concerned now. "She is on a sofa in the other hallway. I think she is still asleep," Chuck replied before heading down the hall. I got up, stretched, and tried to make sense of his words. Did that really happen between Jessica and me? I looked over and saw Jessica waking up, looking as rough as I felt. I walked over to her. "Morning. Are you okay?" She groaned, holding her head. "My head is killing me." "Mine too," I admitted. "I do not remember much of anything." "Same here," she said, giving a tired smile. "It has been a while since I drank that much." I hesitated, then asked, "So, is it true that we were in the bathroom together, and you, unzipped my trousers?" Jessica looked at me, wide-eyed. "Bill, you are married. I know that, and I would not cross that line. You didn't either, I hope?" I nodded quickly. "Yeah, it just does not seem real." After talking to Jessica, I went back to find Chuck, needing a bit more clarity. "Chuck, what exactly happened last night? Did Jessica really, you know?" Chuck sighed, giving me a steady look. "Unlike you, I did not drink as much, so I remember everything clearly. Don't worry, though. The boss was far away and did not see anything. You're respected here, Bill, so we are not telling anyone. And Jessica's got nothing to worry about either. You are safe." I looked at him, surprised. "Are you serious?" Chuck nodded and clapped me on the shoulder. Yeah, Bill. Now go on. Get out of here. I left the office, my mind spinning, and drove home. When I arrived, Mandy was not there, and I suddenly realized she was probably staying at Beth's place. I should have felt something, but oddly, I did not. It was almost as if I had expected it. Sitting down in a chair, I mulled over what to do next. Then an idea came to me. Today, after the party, the company had given everyone the day off. I decided I would spend it out in nature. There was a camping trail nearby, and a day alone sounded like exactly what I needed. I packed a bag, changed into hiking clothes, and grabbed some food and water from the fridge. By around 11 o'clock in the morning, I was on the trail, enjoying the peace and quiet. The only sounds were the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional bird call. It was the break I had been craving. Midway through the trail, I stopped for a rest. I found a nice tree stump, sat down, and took out a sandwich, slowly eating as I soaked in the tranquility. After about 10 minutes, I heard a familiar voice. I turned and saw Mandy and Beth coming down the trail, holding hands. My heart sank, but I tried to stay composed. After I left Mandy on the street last night to return to the corporate party, she must have felt upset, and it looked like Beth had been there to comfort her, probably staying the night. They did not notice me at first since I was sitting with my back to them. I stayed quiet, not wanting to draw attention. They walked past me, maybe 10 yards ahead, unaware I was watching. I observed the way their hands were naturally intertwined, how close they were. It hurt to see, but I could not look away. They headed toward a small pond just off the trail and stood there for a moment, still holding hands. Then I watched as they turned toward each other and shared a kiss. Just as they were about to return to the trail, they noticed me. Beth's eyes widened in surprise. "Were you following us?" she asked, her tone uncertain. "Not exactly," I replied, keeping my voice even. Mandy looked at me, her face showing a mix of surprise, guilt, and maybe a bit of defiance. "Bill, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I needed some space," I said with a shrug. Beth sighed, exchanging a glance with Mandy before looking back at me. "This is awkward, isn't it?" "Awkward does not even begin to cover it," I said, running a hand through my hair. "Look, I came out here to clear my head. I did not plan to run into you too." Mandy took a step forward, tightening her grip on Beth's hand. "We did not plan on seeing you either. We just needed to get away for a bit." "Yeah, I get that," I replied, feeling the tension between us. "So, what happens now?" Beth took a deep breath. "Maybe we should all sit down and talk. We cannot keep ignoring this." I nodded, agreeing reluctantly. "All right, let's talk, but not here. There's a clearing up ahead where we can sit." We walked in silence to the spot, the tension between us almost too much to bear. It was clear we needed this conversation. It was long overdue. When we reached the clearing, we sat down on the grass, forming an awkward triangle. "I never wanted to hurt you, Bill," Mandy began, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I looked at her, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "You should have told me, Mandy, instead of hiding it and letting things get to this point." Beth joined in, her tone gentle. "It wasn't easy for Mandy, Bill. She's been dealing with her feelings for a long time." "Struggling?" I repeated, a note of frustration in my voice. "Do you think this has been easy for me? Finding out my wife's not just cheating but doing it with another woman? You blindsided me." "I know," Mandy said, her eyes welling up with tears. "And I'm so sorry. I just didn't know how to tell you." We sat in heavy silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I need time to process all this." Mandy nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand. Take all the time you need." Beth placed a hand on my shoulder. "We're not asking for forgiveness right now, Bill, just for a bit of understanding." I sighed, feeling a confusing mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. "I don't know what I can offer right now, but I'll try to understand." For a while, none of us spoke, each of us lost in our thoughts. It was a small step, but at least it was a step towards some kind of closure. We walked around the pond and the surrounding area, trying to come to terms with this new and awkward reality. Though our conversation had eased the tension a bit, The air was still thick with unresolved emotions. After a while, we decided to head back. Since Mandy and Beth had come by bus, I offered to give them a ride. They agreed, and we made our way back to my car. The drive was mostly silent, each of us still processing our earlier conversation. As we wound through the roads, I glanced at Mandy, who was staring out the window, lost in her own thoughts. Breaking the silence, I asked the question that had been nagging at me. Mandy, you understand that if you want me to stay with you, you'll have to end things with Beth, right? She turned her head slightly, not quite meeting my eyes. She nodded silently, her face a mix of resignation and sadness, showing just how hard this decision was for her. The car fell back into silence, and the weight of her decision filled the space between us. When we arrived at our apartment, Mandy stepped out slowly, moving with a heavy deliberateness. "I'll talk to you later, Bill," she said softly before heading inside. I watched her go, feeling a pang of sadness and uncertainty, then drove Beth back to her place. The silence was thick with tension, but as we neared her apartment, Beth spoke up. "Bill, for what it's worth, I'm really sorry about all this." "I know, Beth," I replied. We pulled up to her apartment, and just as she was getting out, my phone rang. It was Chuck. "Hey, Bill, sorry to bother you, but there's something we need to talk about. Can you come by the office?" "Sure, Chuck. I'll be there in a bit," I replied. Hanging up, Beth looked at me, curious. "Work stuff?" "Yeah, seems like it," I said. "See you around, Beth." She nodded and stepped out of the car. As I drove to the office, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. When I arrived, Chuck was waiting for me at the entrance, looking unusually serious. "What's going on, Chuck?" I asked as I walked up to him. "Bill, we need to talk about what happened at the party last night," he said, leading me into a quiet conference room and closing the door. "Listen, Bill, there's been some talk. Some people saw you and Jessica together, and rumors are starting to spread." A knot formed in my stomach. "What kind of rumors?" "Well, people are saying you two were a bit too close. And with the boss's wife showing up unexpectedly, it stirred things up quite a bit. She apparently saw you with Jessica, and now the boss isn't too pleased." "Wait, the boss's wife was there?" I asked, stunned. "Yeah, she came by late and saw you and Jessica. The boss hasn't said anything directly to you yet, but he's definitely aware." I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the headache from the night before creeping back. "Great, just what I needed." Chuck sighed. "Look, I covered for you as much as I could, but you might want to keep a low profile for a bit. The boss is likely going to want a word with you soon." I nodded, feeling the weight of yet another problem on my shoulders. "Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate it." The next morning, as I drove into work, I couldn't shake the feeling of regret. Walking with Mandy and Beth yesterday, I realized just how much I had messed up. My wife had betrayed me, and yet there I was, calmly trying to work things out with her and Beth. I kept telling myself I'd have acted the same way if it had been a bodybuilder instead of Beth, but deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely true. When I arrived at the office, I could feel the tension in the air. Colleagues avoided eye contact, and there was a hum of hushed whispers. I went to my desk, trying to focus on work, but it wasn't long before a message from the boss popped up, asking me to come to his office. My heart sank as I stood up, each step to his office feeling heavier than the last. When I entered, the boss was seated at his desk, looking stern. His wife sat nearby, her expression unreadable. I closed the door and stood there, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. "Bill, have a seat," the boss said, gesturing to the chair in front of him. I sat down, feeling their eyes on me. "I understand there are some rumors going around about last night," I began, trying to get ahead of the conversation. "Rumors?" the boss's wife interjected sharply. "I saw you with Jessica. You were practically draped all over her." I swallowed hard. I was drunk. I don't remember much, but I assure you it wasn't what it looked like. The boss leaned forward, his expression hard. "Bill, I built this company on trust and professionalism. Last night, you showed neither." "I know, and I'm sorry," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I've never acted that way before, and it won't happen again." The boss's wife scoffed. "Sorry doesn't cut it. You embarrassed us and the company." I nodded, feeling the sting of her words. I understand. The boss sighed and leaned back. For now, consider this a formal warning. Any more incidents like this, and you're out. Understood? Yes, sir, I replied, feeling a mix of relief and shame. Good. Now, get back to work, he said, dismissing me with a wave. Later that day, I was working on a campaign proposal when Jessica came over, looking nervous and glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Hey, can we talk? She asked softly. I nodded, motioning for her to sit. What's up? I'm really sorry about last night, she began, her voice shaky. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I didn't think. It's okay, Jessica, I said, trying to reassure her. She seemed relieved. Thanks, Bill. By the end of that day, I was completely drained. The drive home felt endless, and when I finally walked through the door, Mandy was sitting on the couch, looking anxious. She stood up as soon as she saw me. Bill, we need to talk, she said, her voice unsteady. I know, I replied, feeling a mix of dread and determination. Let's sit down. We sat across from each other on the couch. Mandy took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she began. I've thought a lot about what you said, Bill. I know I made a huge mistake. What else? I asked, keeping my tone steady. I love you, Bill. I don't want to lose you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'll end things with Beth, I promise. If you say so, Mandy. That's all I needed to hear, I replied, but forgiveness didn't come easy. After my walk in the woods, I felt like I'd finally come to my senses. The tension at home and work was suffocating, so I decided to clear my head with a walk in the park. As I strolled, I couldn't shake the memory of my conversation with Beth. I realized I needed advice from someone with a fresh perspective, someone who knew me. Pulling out my phone, I decided to call my dad, who lived with my mom in another city. After a few rings, he picked up. Hey, Bill, good to hear from you. Hi, Dad. I need to talk about something, I said, my voice heavy with emotion. Of course, son. What's on your mind? Taking a deep breath, I started from the beginning, explaining everything about Mandy, Beth, and the mess of the past few weeks. I told him how I found out about the affair, the awkward walk with Mandy and Beth in the park, the fallout at work after the corporate party, everything. My dad listened in silence, and by the time I finished, I could feel his disappointment across the line. Bill, what on earth are you doing? He finally said, his tone sharp. What do you mean, Dad? Why did you walk with them in the park? Why did you bring them home? Why are you even still with Mandy after all this? Dad, it's complicated, I began, but he cut me off. Complicated? She cheated on you, Bill. Not just with anyone, but with another woman. I don't care if it was a man or a woman. Cheating is cheating. You should have left her the second you found out. I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. I know, Dad, but I don't know. I thought maybe we could work through it. Work through it? My dad's voice was edged with frustration. Bill, you're my son, and I love you, but you're being a fool. You walked with your wife while she held hands with someone else. Do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? Infidelity is infidelity, no matter the details. I guess I was just trying to be understanding, I muttered, feeling defensive. Son, you don't have to understand anything except that she broke your trust. If you stay with her, you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of misery. Trust me on this, Bill. You need to leave her. His words hit me hard. I'd been trying to find a resolution, to hold on to what we had, but hearing this from my dad made the truth painfully clear. So you're saying I should just walk away? End it all? Absolutely. Relationships are built on trust and respect. Mandy shattered both. By staying, you're only dragging out your own pain. You deserve better than this, Bill. But what about the years we've shared, the memories, the life we've built? I asked, my voice cracking. Bill, think about your future. Do you really want to live in constant doubt? Every time you look at Mandy, you'll remember her betrayal. It's not worth it. I paused, letting his words sink in. I guess I needed to hear it from someone else. And I'm telling you, as your father, you need to move on. Find someone who will love and respect you the way you deserve. Mandy made her choice. Now it's time for you to make yours. Tears pricked at my eyes as I realized he was right. Thanks, Dad. I appreciate your honesty. Anytime, Bill. Remember, your mother and I are here for you. Just give us a call if you need anything. I will, Dad. Thanks again. We said our goodbyes, and I ended the call. I sat there on a park bench, staring at my phone, feeling the weight of my dad's advice. Later that evening, when I returned home, I could hear the shower running. Mandy was in the bathroom. I sighed, bracing myself for what I knew I had to do. I walked into the living room and noticed Mandy's phone buzzing on the coffee table. I hesitated, then picked it up and saw a message from Beth. My heart pounded as I read her words. Mandy, think about the freedom you'd have with me. I understand you, support you, and make you feel alive. Leaving Bill will free you from the guilt and tension. We can build a life together without secrets or lies. I love you. Your darling, Beth. When Mandy came out of the bathroom, I was waiting, holding her phone. Bill, what's wrong? She asked, worry crossing her face. I held up the phone. I got a message from Beth. Care to explain? Her eyes widened and she stammered, Bill, I can explain. Save it, Mandy, I interrupted. I've heard enough. I'm done with this. I'm done with you. She tried to stop me, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't listen. I'd made up my mind. I couldn't live like this anymore. The next morning, I filed for divorce. The process moved faster than I'd expected. We divided our assets without much dispute. What do you think about this story? Write in comments. If you don't follow our channel Cheating Room, you will probably never hear from us again. If you are subscribed, congratulations, you will not miss any exciting story. Thank you for listening to this shocking story with us. See you again.
Bye bye.